It is Wednesday morning and it is the 16th of September of the year 2020. And yesterday, no not yesterday, it's a couple of days ago that I started to read the last chapter of Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth, written by Stuart Holroyd, published 1977. And a friend turned up and I just thought, okay, let's stop it here and end the end another day. And a couple of busy days have gone by and well, I don't exactly know where I stopped, to be honest, but I think I'll just start here because Stuart Holroyd, the chapter is entitled Anatomy of a Mystery, and he looks back on your communication and he's wondering how real it is it not real? Anyway, you have to listen to the previous chapter. I continue now on page 313, Anatomy of a Mystery. So, assuming that they both exist, he is talking about whether these are foreign or discarnate agencies who are giving the information. The formulation foreign or discarnate entities corresponds with our hypothesis 4 and 5, which is previously mentioned. So, assuming that they both exist, how would you distinguish a spirit from an extraterrestrial? Well, for a start, the content of their respective communication might be a pointer. There is quite a substantial literature of alleged spirit communications, but they then tend to fall into William James's philosophy and water category, as that most critical of early psychic researchers, Frank Whitmore, wrote of the Reverend Stanton Moses' spirit of teachings. It needed not that a spirit should descend from the seventh sphere to teach, to preach views which could be heard from any Unitarian pulpit. Such teachings, which are usually obtained through automatic writing, generally consist of pious sentiments, exhortations to a more noble way of life, and descriptions of the next world, all couched in a pedestrian and woolly language, which makes a sarcasm of the term inspirational writing, which is often applied to them. Potmore's remark about spirit teaching implies, particularly for the modern reader, that Stanton Moses' automatic writing was channeling nothing more than contents of his own unconscious. But this is not a justified conclusion on the evidence of the content alone. If spirits are, as both some of their own alleged testimonies and esoteric traditions maintain, the surviving non-physical part of a former human being's reluctant to leave the earth and its physical attractions, we should not expect them to be wiser or more knowledgeable than human beings. The only thing they would know more about would be the mode and conditions of post-mortal existence. The content of spirit literature tends to bear this out. The Ossining communications clearly do not belong to this genre. Their philosophy and cosmology are broader than those of any so-called spirit teachings. Tom says at one point, Tom speaks for the collective, Tom says at one point, what we are asking from a universal point, and not from an earthly or spirit point. There are many things in which you on the planet Earth are involved that in truth do not have the nature of the universe, but only of the planet Earth, or of the spirit planes that surround the planet Earth. The spirit planes, of which in spiritist literature there are generally held to be 6, with the Earth constituting a 7th physical plane, have been described in many inspirational writings, but such writings do not offer any description of the universe as a whole, such as we get from Tom, nor do they represent a consistently universal viewpoint. Throughout the communications, all problems, all situations, personal, interpersonal, political, ethical, religious, are consistently analyzed and regarded subspecie acterniatis. Oh, let me say this right. Acterniatis. I don't know what that means. Subspecie acterniatis. There's no evidence in the literature of putative spirit communications that a spirit would have either the knowledge or the motivation to maintain a consistently universal point of view. But couldn't a mischievous spirit have invented the whole thing and enjoyed improvising and elaborating the story over the years? The correct predictions, the good sense and wisdom, and the implicit morality of the communicators, I think, argue against such a frivolous explanation. These points also make it unlikely that manipulative spirits should be responsible, because the motive normally attributed to these spirits, namely that of gaining control over many souls, is missing. The trio, after all, have never been encouraged to follow or collect followers. As I have said, arguments by elimination cannot be conclusive, but this discussion has, I think, established that there are strong supportive arguments for the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Personally, I would be happier with this hypothesis if we didn't have Atlantis, UFOs, apocalypse, dolphins, ancient civilizations, consciousness expansion, previous incarnations, and a new age, all in the same package. But perhaps the zeitgeist of the 1970s really is in touch with the unified, infinite intelligence. If that was true, we would surely be on the threshold of a new age. It would be rather less exciting, however, though not much less remarkable, if something purporting to be the unified infinite intelligence should be in touch with the zeitgeist. Which brings us to the second key question that I wish to discuss in this conclusion. Is the natural of the communications, or is the material of the communications original? We have already established that the themes are not original, but the question is whether Tom's contributions to them are. Before we attempt to answer this, let us be clear about what we might infer from the presence or the lack of originality in the communications. It is not simply a matter of the more originality, the more apparent authenticity. This is true for some types of statements, but not for all. We have in the communication statements of various kinds. For instance, A. Statements of verifiable fact. B. Statements of non-verifiable facts. C. Statements of alleged fact. D. Predictions. E. Exhortations. F. Philosophical statements. G. Psychological statements. H. Moral statements. The term original implies different things with respect to these different types of statement. It may imply the exercise of supernormal or cognition, types A and B, or mean novel, type C, unexpected, type D, insightful, type G, or without precedent or parallel, types F and H. Now, originality in statements of type A, B, and D, for instance, as Gioli had a bad day today, A. At a secret meeting, the Israeli leaders decided to make a foray into the Lebanon, B. There will be a settlement between Israel and the Arabs in July, D. Is suggestive of the operation of a more than human intelligence. Originality in statements of type C, for example, about Atlantis, the beginnings of Earth, civilizations at Aksu, and about the universe and its other civilizations, it is certainly consistent with the existence of such an intelligence. But in statements of types F and H, unoriginality would tend to support the extraterrestrial intelligence hypothesis, in the communicator's claim to have been influencing Earth's civilizations and using other human channels throughout history were correct. We would, if that were the case, expect to find historical precedents for and parallels with their philosophy and teaching. And indeed we do. Parallels with Gnosticism. I have already remarked that the term aeons, by which Tom refers to himself and his peers, is used with a specialized meaning of beings beyond space and time. In certain rare texts of the Gnostic philosophers, now Gnosticism is a philosophy and a religious view of man, the world and the cosmos, that was widespread throughout the Near and Middle East before Christianity, and that profoundly influenced certain aspects of Christian thought and teaching. With elements derived from or corresponding with Egyptian, Babylonian, Greek, Iranian and Jewish traditions, Gnosticism may be regarded as a syncretic or as a seminal philosophy. Much of its literature was suppressed and destroyed by state Christianity and the church fathers in the first century of the Christian era, so it is not easy for us to understand how influential and widespread it was. The classic study of Gnostic literature, G.R.S. Mead's Fragments of a Faith Forgotten, is aptly entitled, but it is no exaggeration to say that amongst the tenets of this forgotten faith are some of the oldest, most universal, and most tenacious beliefs of mankind. Tom's definition of the nature and purpose of the soul is pure Gnosticism. He likens the soul to a spark that is a particle of us, the aeons, and whose purpose it is to return whence it came. Now compare this with Mead's summary of the Gnostic myth of the creation of man by the demiurgic angels of nature's powers. According to this myth, at first, the nature powers could only evolve an envelope or plasm, which could not stand upright, but lay on the ground helpless and crawling like a worm. Then the power above, in compassion, sent forth the life spark, and the plasm rose upright and limbs developed and went knit together. That is to say, it hardened or became denser as race succeeded race. And so the body of man was evolved, and the light spark, or real man, tabernacled in it. This light spark hastens back after death to those of its own nature, and the rest of the elements of the body are dissolved. Gnosticism makes much of the forgetfulness of the soul, or the light spark tabernacled in the physical body, and of the density of the physical world that the spiritual powers in man and in the cosmos have to contend with. And Tom says, sometimes we peer at you and we say, the three of them have forgotten who they are, and they are trapped in the physical and the thinking of the physical world. The use of the term the thinking of the physical world in this context is interesting, for in the Gnostic text, the Pistis Sophia, there is an account of the evolution of the soul, which Mead summarizes as follows. Having descended to the lowest depth of chaos, she at length reaches the limit, and the path of her pilgrimage begins to lead towards upwards, to spirit again. Thus, she reaches the middle point of balance, and still yearning for the light, rounds the turning point of her cyclic course, and, changing the tendency of her thought, or mind, or nature, recites her penitential hymns, or repentance. Her chief enemy is the false light, and the desire nature. Here's another quotation, and I invite the reader to guess whether it comes from the communications or from another source. Jesus was born like all other men. He differed from the rest in that his soul, being strong and pure, remembered. In other words, he remembered who he was, where he came from, and what his mission on earth was. The words could be Tom's, but in fact they are Mead's statement of a tenet of Gnostic Christian beliefs. While we are on the subject of Jesus, here is another interesting correspondence. In the communication on the 4th of January 1975, Tom stated, "The being Jesus Christ was all of us at once. Jehovah came with the perfect goodness that is in each of us. Within you, there are various elements, but Jehovah had from each of us the most perfect of the elements of us." Now compare this with Mead's statement of the Gnostic interpretations of the beginning of the fourth Gospel. The Logos contained in himself the whole substance of the eons. Jesus remembered who he was, whence he came, and what he had to do, because his soul was strong and pure. The ideas of purity, purification, and refinement are recurrent in the communications. In one of the earliest communications channeled by Phyllis from the Rir, there occurs a statement of the basic Gnostic insight. When we return to your physical world, we oftentimes forget the spiritual side of our nature. This is followed by the statement that souls have evolved through processing. In other words, through being progressively purified and refined. And Andrija adds, the work is not just our work, it is the work of the universe. This later idea is interesting, for the outstanding contemporary Gnostic scholar Hans Jonas writes that this process of the evolution of the soul is part of the restoration of the deity's own wholeness. Possibly this is the most fundamental correspondence between the philosophy expressed by Tom Andrija as spokesman for the Nine and Gnosticism. The idea that the evolution is an individual souls has a cosmic significance, that whatever is achieved by and in the microcosm resonates in the macrocosm. Mead wrote, whether we interpret the allegories from the macrocosm or microcosm standpoint, it is ever the evolution of the mind that the initiates of old have sought to teach us. The material mind was to be purified and so become one with the spiritual mind. In the communications, this process of evolution of the mind is spoken of as the rising of the consciousness of the planet, which Tom defines as bringing souls out of darkness, and further elaborates that when we say darkness, we do not mean negativity, but true darkness, for they do not see and they do not understand the cosmic. So the raising of consciousness, the evolution of mind, is to be accomplished through the communication of knowledge and understanding. This again is pure Gnosticism. The word Gnosti means knowledge, and in its religious aspect, Gnosticism is a belief in salvation through knowledge, as it is to Gnostic tradition that we owe the symbolic equation that runs right through Western thought and literature, of darkness with ignorance and light with understanding. The poet Kenneth Rexroth, in an introduction to modern edition of Mead's Fragments, specifies as characteristically Gnostic the concept of the universe as a moral background existence, itself as the struggle of light against darkness. In Judaism and Christianity, as well as in Gnosticism, he remarks, we have a cosmic drama focused on a man, a drama in which the individual worshipper plays a primary role. In the communications, the trio, both as individuals and collectively, are said to be playing a primary role in the cosmic drama currently being played out, which consists of battles being fought out both in the spheres and on the physical planet Earth. The Battle of Armageddon has been in progress in the spheres, Thomas said, since November 1974. And the work of the trio and their visits to the Middle East to meditate was to prevent a corresponding situation flaring up on Earth. Apropos this, an explanation of Mead's is interesting. The wars in heaven precede the conflict of good and evil on Earth. Gnosticism then teaches the reincarnation and evolution of souls, the forgetfulness that follows entrapment in the density of the physical, the fact that the refinement and purification of the individual soul has cosmic significance, that salvation is achieved through Gnostic knowledge, and that the universe is a moral battleground where individual human struggle counts. All these teachings, together with the characteristic Gnostic symbolism of the dark and light of the soul, the opposition of darkness and light, the cosmic battle, are also to be found in the communications. That the material of the communication is simply derivative from Gnostic sources through the consciousness or unconscious mind of one or more members of the trio, is a possibility that we can discount for reasons already adequately gone into. How then are we to explain these parallels? I would like to leave the reader to ponder an explanation suggested by Mead in the Prolegomena to Fragments of a Faith Forgotten. This is what Mead says. The soul of man returns again and again to learn the lessons of life in this great world school. According to one of the great doctrines of general religions, If this is so, it follows that when similar conditions reoccur, or a similar class of souls returns to continue its lesson of experience, it may well be even that many of the identical souls who were embodied in the early centuries of Christianity are continuing the experience amongst ourselves today. For why otherwise do the same ideas occur? Why do the same problems arise, the same ways of looking at things? They cannot fall into a midst from the Ewigkeit. Must it not be that they have been brought back by minds to whom they have already been familiar? Parallels with esotericism. Esotericism. Parallels with esotericism. Esotericism, which is known to its devotees as the ageless wisdom, or the secret doctrine, is a corpus of knowledge and teaching allegedly possessed by the esoteric hierarchy, or the masters of wisdom, portions of which have from time to time been released to mankind through various channels. In modern times, the two main channels have been Helena Blavatsky and Alice A. Bailey. When Mrs. Blavatsky published her Isis Unveiled, 1877, and The Secret Doctrine, 1888, the hierarchy completed the first stage of a three-stage plan for the unfoldment of the ageless wisdom. The second, or intermediate stage, was accompanied through the series of books written by Alice Bailey between 1919 and 1949. The third stage, according to the teaching, will be the revelatory and beginning after 1975. It will comprise communications on a worldwide scale, employing, in addition to human channels, modern media such as television and radio. Interesting. Unfortunately, they've been bored. Theodore Rozak, who is professor of history at California State University, as well as a most perceptive and eloquent observer of the contemporary cultural scene, has written of the modern esoterists, with particular reference to Mrs. Blavatsky, that if we search the strange mythological explorations of these occult evolutionists to discover the vision they offer of human potentiality, we may, at the very least, find them among the most innovative psychologists of our time. In their work, we see the evolutionary image being used for the first time in the modern West as a new standard of human sanity, or rather as a newly rediscovered standard, for to a degree that far surpasses the works of Nietzsche or Bergson. They remain unabashedly loyal to the schools of the hidden wisdom, and so link contemporary thought on human potentiality with a rich basis in tradition. You will look hard outside the ranks of the devotees for a favourable opinion of the esoterists prior to the 1975, when Rozak published this opinion in his book Unfinished Animal. Significantly, the book is subtitled The Aquarian Frontier and the Evolution of Consciousness. The term Aquarian is one that has found its way out of esoteric doctrine into popular usage and understanding in recent years. The astronomical fact that in the 1970s the solar system is moving into the sphere of influence of the constellation Aquarius and out of that of Pisces is regarded by esoterists as the most significant cosmic event, so far as mankind is concerned, since the entry into Pisces, which inaugurated the Christian era. A new age is different from the old, as the Christian era was from the age that preceded it, is upon us, and the belief that it will be an age when humanity will take a great evolutionary leap forward is another esoteric idea that has become exoteric recently. Exotic. At the beginning of the Aquarian age, moreover, the tradition holds that much more of the ageless wisdom will be revealed than ever before, for mankind will be in the process of becoming sufficiently evolved to be able to understand it and benefit by it. The tremendously increased interest in revealed teachings and religion of all kinds in the present decade would certainly seem to bear this out. The New Age esoteric tradition maintained will culminate in the reappearance of the Christ, and this event will be preceded by the externalization of the hierarchy. That is to say, the appearance in the world of a number of great initiates and men of wisdom who, while doing normal worldly job, will be serving as guides and spiritual leaders. These members of the hierarchy, it is said, have long been preparing themselves for existence in the unfamiliar confines of the physical body. Their work of preparation will be assisted by a large and continually growing group of people in all countries and walks of life, who are known as the new group of world servers. The Christ, who has last incarnated as Jesus of Nazareth, will return near the beginning of the Aquarian Age when, through the work of these precursors, man has manifested in his political, economic and social relations a will to base his conduct on the principles of cooperation, sharing, goodwill, mutual responsibility and kindness. He will return to complete the work begun in Palestine 2,000 years ago, which could not be brought to fruition at that time because mankind was not sufficiently educated and spiritually evolved to understand and apply the teachings. With the circumstances prevailing in the present age, a general higher standard of education, widespread awareness of the imminence of a planetary crisis, and the availability of media of mass communications, the task of world transformation will this time surely be accomplished. The esoteric teachings do not maintain that the hierarchy hail from elsewhere in the cosmos, but apart from this, the message corresponds pretty closely with what Tom says about the New Age, the landing, the preparations for that event, the previous work of the Christ through Jesus of Nazareth, and the raising of consciousness. Let me quote a passage from the teachings of the Tibetan, channeled by Alice Bailey, to illustrate how close these correspondences are. Alice Bailey: the New Age will bring in eventually a civilization and a culture which will be utterly different to anything hitherto known. I would remind you here that all civilizations and cultures are externalizations, modified, qualified, and adapted to racial and national needs, of the potent, vibrating and planned activity of the world of initiates and disciples who constitute the hierarchy of the time. Their plans, their thinking, and their potency pour out ceaselessly and affect the consciousness of their disciples. These latter step down the inflowing energies so that the thinkers and idealists can grasp these new emergent truths more accurately. Eventually, the truths thus grasped change the consciousness of humanity as a whole and raise it, if you like that phrase. Thus models of daily living, civilized methods of conduct, and cultural developments eventuate. All this is traceable to the group of initiates upon the inner side, who thus serve their fellow men and carry forward consciously and with intent the law of evolution. Both the esotericists and the Ossining communications envisage a necessary change in human consciousness being affected through occult influence by means of energy and knowledge being channeled from a higher source. Both see the preparatory work being carried out by groups of human beings throughout the world who have volunteered to be in service. Both expressed awareness of the hazards and difficulties of working in this way. In the story the present book has related, there have been failures, backsliding, wrong turning taken, interpersonal conflicts, disrupting the work, and the reader might have asked on several occasions, why the Nine, if they are as powerful and knowledgeable as they are supposed to be, allow these things to occur or fail to foresee that they are going to occur? Tom has explained this in various places, and when we recall his explanation, the following words of the Tibetan have a familiar ring. They, the hierarchy, impress the plan and some suggestion as to its scope upon the mind of some men, or some women, upon the physical plane. If that mind is unstable or over-satisfied, if it is filled with pride, with despair, or with self-depreciation, the vision does not come through with clarity of outline. If the emotional body is vibrating violently with some rhythm set up by the personality, or if the physical vehicle is ailing and concentrated attention is therefore prevented, what will happen? The master will turn sadly away, distressed to think of the opportunity for service that the worker has lost through his own fault, and he will seek someone else to fill the need, someone perhaps not so fundamentally suitable, but the only one available on account of the failure of the first one approached. The idea that there exist extraterrestrial intelligences that are at the present time implementing a plan for the planet Earth and for man's further evolution, and that the success of the plan depends upon man's having the imagination to comprehend new knowledge and the will to act on it, are common to both esoteric teachings and the Osinian communications. Other features that two sources have in common are the doctrine of reincarnation, that the multiple bodies, the physical, the etheric, the emotional, etc., that man possesses a cosmology based on the concept of polarity and balance, and a scientific philosophy and psychology developed around the imagery of fire, light, energy, and vibration. The correspondences indeed are so close that it is surely not merely idly fanciful to wonder whether the Osinian communications might not be a principal part of the revelatory phase of the unfolding of the ageless wisdom, which esoteric tradition maintained would begin about 1975. New heading: Parallels with other contemporary communications. In one of the communications, Tom said that there were other groups and individuals in the world who were in contact with other extraterrestrial units, but stressed that Phyllis was the only one channeled for the Nine, and that the communications with the Osinian group were the most complete and detailed that were being channeled to Earth at the present time. When I first heard of this statement, I thought it would be very interesting to try and track down some of these other communicators and see if the information they were getting corresponded with that channeled by Phyllis. If such correspondences were found, this would surely be the most conclusive evidence possible that the information emanated from a source independent of all the groups involved in communications. The problem was how to locate the other communicators. We had one example in the case of Andrew Watson, Lyell's brother, who had been out of South Africa, who had been out of touch in South Africa and independently communicating with Aragon. But his material was not published, and our knowing about it was seemingly fortuitous, so it seemed impossible to know how many similar cases there might be, and how one could get to know about them. However, in the course of the last few months, by browsing through bookshops and book catalogues, I have come across accounts of putative recipients of communications from extraterrestrials which have striking correspondence with the Osinian material. The first is released by Brad Steiger in his book Revelation, The Divine Fire. The channel for this material is named Charles, lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and is described as a blue-collar worker of modest education. The communicating entity identified itself by the name Ishkomar. In the following transcription of some of Ishkomar's material, I have italicized interesting points of correspondence with the Osinian material. Italicized. I don't know whether how I can read that. You can't read italicized. I was brought to the vicinity of this planet approximately 30,000 years ago by your method of time measurement. Your planet and the living forms upon it have a specific value to us. Your form of life has a particular value to us. For this reason, at about the time I was brought to the vicinity of your world, we interfered with the natural development of the species of man that inhabited this planet. Our purpose was to shorten the cycle of development necessary for the human inhabitants of this planet to be of use to us. We have worked patiently with you for over 30,000 years. The development brought about would have taken by normal circles over 250,000 years. Our attention, however, is not to control or to rule over you. Intergalactic law within our group forbids this. We are, however, permitted to guide you. Your acceptance of us is by your own choice. We, however, are not alone in our interests in your world. There is an existence with us, another group. Their interests are not necessarily harmful to you, yet their methods are in direct opposition to ours. They also have interfered with the development of your planet. They wish to reach their ends, not by cooperation, but by control and domination. You must reach a high level of mental development and knowledge to be able to understand our purpose. We have attempted to gain your cooperation for thousands of years. We have been vigorously opposed by the other group. We must achieve our goal by guidance of your kind, but you must desire guidance for us to be of assistance to you. We are using many methods at this time to inform your people of our presence and our immediate purpose. The time is quite near for cooperation between us to begin. Your next step upwards will soon begin. Full knowledge of our presence will soon be known to your people. There will be, at that time, great upheavals on your planet. We regret this cannot in any way be avoided. We therefore have warned man repeatedly to prepare for these events, both mentally and physically. I am sure that the correspondence with your sinning material, particularly with regard to the points I italicized, will be clear enough to the reader to require no further comment. The same is true of some of the Mark Age material channeled by the medium Nada Yolanda, a substantial corpus of communications received over the last 15 years, from which I have extracted the following significant passages. Significant passages. Coming up. The space people who are here at this time are here to aid the spiritual program. The Space Brothers, both physical and etheric, are here to supplement, not to replace, your own God consciousness, your own attunement with your higher self. They can do many things with their equipment in order to awaken and to stimulate certain spiritual centers to help you along the path. The time is short, and that is why they have come to aid this planet and the race upon it, to evolve a little bit more quickly. As you know, coming into this particular aspect of your world and history, we can and do desire to raise your vibrational frequency to accept and to utilize properly and the new rate of vitality of your present expression or vehicles. You have upon your planet thousands upon thousands who have no idea of spiritual enlightenment, who have no desire or need for psychic explanations, yet they are receiving inspirationally and through mental telepathic guidance our ideas and our future aims. You have them in every walk of life. You have people who come from other planets who know no such thing as life on other planets, who even may not believe in life on other planets, yet they are in your Earth's atmosphere waiting, living their life, normal, so-called average, everyday, prosaic lives, according to you who are studying, and they are still receiving. Their teachers are around them. Their higher selves knows who they are and what their destiny is. Within every single human being is a transmitting and sending set of vital energy, which is the vital energy of the universe. The purpose is that each of you should be able to be transmitters and receivers of this energy, to perform and create as co-creators with God. That is why we try to make you understand that we are not here to control you or to hurt you. We are here to help and understand your true roles and to help you to realize your true powers, which you have forgotten on this particular planet called Earth because of its density. Although you may have incarnated from very high etheric realms and other planets which have exercised these powers and rights, while you are in the Earth vibration, incarnated in this set of vibrations, you have lost or have forgotten, as though in a dream state, those natural, inherent rights and powers. When we use this vehicle, for instance, when we use Yolanda's body, it is strictly through the dedication and the free will of the high self-consciousness. Before incarnating into this life, she dedicated her vehicle to these teachers to do this. We protect and teach and guide you gently because you are of us and one of us. But you have volunteered your mission. We have volunteered ours. You are being taught the meaning of cooperation, coordination with every other realm, dimension and planet, because one cannot be out of order or out of character while the others are being geared to a certain role and a certain function. If you're not in cooperation with them, they cannot move forward with ease and harmony. You are holding them up. If they are hindered or held back to do a role or play a part in your evolution or growth, they cannot expend that time's energy upon their own evolutionary growth. We bring this message through to you at the peak of the cycle known to this unit as the action cycle, because it precipitates several plans in the overall program. Plan 1 is space communication, physical and mental, accepted and presented to the mass media. Plan 2 is occupation by Space Brothers for further illumination of Integrated Solar Federation of Planetary Brotherhood. Plan 3 is mass education on the spiritual program known as evolution into the fourth dimensional consciousness. To say the very least, the parallels and correspondences we have noted in the foregoing pages indicate that the Ossining communications are not an isolated phenomenon or the product of somebody's crazed subconscious. They have links with history, with esoteric tradition and with other contemporary psychic phenomena. Whether they are something more than a remarkable and fascinating psychic phenomenon, whether they really do emanate from an extraterrestrial source, are questions that we should, by all accounts, soon have unequivocal answers to. Speaking of the landing, let us give Tom the last word in a communication held on the 11th of January 1977, just before this book was delivered to the publishers. John asked whether what has been stated in the book fully covers what you once said about the landing. Tom replied, "It is important that it is stated in the chronicle of the three of you that there will be physical civilizations that will come to raise the level of this planet Earth, to bring it out of its own contamination, to purify it and to prepare the people to keep it in a pure state so that it does not become in a collapsed state for future generations. This is the most beautiful of all the planets that exists in the universe. It has the greatest variety that is expressed in this book, but it is also important to tell the readers that there is hope for future generations on this planet. For in truth, if this planet may be purified, then it will be the greatest paradise for all souls. It is also important that they understand that each of them is responsible for him or herself, for their neighbors, for future generations, and for the universe. And if they believe that they will have life after their physical death, then they must understand that what they do in this life, they must undo in the next. It is of the greatest importance that they understand the necessity for the purification of this planet Earth, and that they understand too that it cannot be done with their technology, for the time is past for saving it, for so saving it. This must be told so that they will not create difficulty for the civilizations that will come. This is the end, but there is one more page, and I shall read it too. It says here, St. Matthew 24. I'm not a religious person for many reasons, but there are some good words in some religions. And ye shall hear of wars, and rumours of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence, and earthquakes in diverse places. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many wax cold. But be that shall endure unto the end, and the same shall be saved. Immediately after the tribulations of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, with power and great glory. Wow! I can hardly believe I've finished it now. 9 chapters, Prelude to the landing on planet Earth. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been doing the meditations every Sunday night at 7 here in the UK. It's all on my YouTube channel. I've also read The Only Planet of Choice, which was absolutely wonderful. I read it in English and in German because I think we really are at a crucial point of our evolution. And unbelievable. I wonder what they would say. Well, never mind, they see us now. Oh yeah, and I find it very interesting that a good friend of mine, Magenta Pixie, also channels the 9. Or is it 18? I don't think so. Anyway, as they say, much is channeled, much is brought, much to be learned. Have a wonderful life.